I would ask all the counselors to make sure you're logged in. Make sure you're logged in. Especially you, Tony. My computer has restarted twice without me being able to control it already today. All right, everybody, let's go live. Are we up? We're all good. There we are. Thank you very much, everybody. I'm going to call this meeting to order. This is the Transportation Standing Committee for October 27th, 2022. I'm Wei Mason, your chair. Before we introduce the rest of the committee members and staff, I'd like to acknowledge that Halifax Regional Municipality is located in Mi'kma'ki, the ancestral and traditional lands of the Mi'kmaq people. The municipality recognizes and acknowledges the peace and friendship treaties signed in this territory and recognizes we are all treaty people, and we endeavor every day to do a better job recognizing those treaties than we have in the past. Today I'm joined by Councillor Stoddart, our Vice Chair, Becky Kent, Tony Mancini, and Tim Outthit, who are members of the committee. Paul Russell has sent his regrets, and we're also joined because of the awesome presentation we're going to get from our excellent staff by, I see Councillor Daigle-Gammon and Councillor Purdy and Councillor Morse are here for a traffic safety update. Our staff today are Katie Campbell, our legislative assistant, Colin Taylor, our solicitor, and Brad Anguish told me he lost the coin toss and he's in the CAO's chair today. So thank you all for coming. So I'll call for an approval of the October 3rd, 2022 minutes. Moved by Councillor Stoddart, seconded by Councillor Outthit. Is there any further discussions, errors, or omissions? Seeing none, we'll move to a vote. All those in favor? Passes. We'll move to approval of the order of business and approval of additions and deletions. Madam Clerk, are there any changes to the agenda?
There are no changes to the agenda.
Any members of council have any changes they'd like to make? Seeing none, if I could have a mover and a seconder for the agenda. Moved by Councillor Kent, seconded by Councillor Outthit. Any further discussion on the agenda? Seeing none, we'll move to a vote. All those in favor? Opposed? No strenuous opposition. It passes. Thank you. Business arising from the minutes, there is none. Are there any conflicts of interest from the members? Seeing none, we'll move on. Oh, I should have said when we started, when I was introducing everybody, unfortunately I have a conflict. I'm going to be leaving at 2:20 to head to Truro. I've been asked to present about the center plan and site plan approval and form-based code to the Town of Truro Council. And we've already rescheduled twice because of storms, including Fiona, so I'm going. So I'll be handing this over to Councillor Stoddart when we get there. There's no declarations of conflict of interest, there's no motions of reconsideration, no motions of rescission, there's no consideration of deferred business or tabled matters, which brings us to 10.1 correspondence. Madam Clerk, is there any correspondence?
There's been general correspondence and also correspondence for 12.1.1 and 12.1.2.
And that's been circulated to the committee. Very good. Any petitions, Madam Clerk?
No petitions.
Do any members of the committee have a petition to present at this time? No petitions, and there are no presentations today. This brings us to information items brought forward. There are none. 12.1.1, the moment you've all been waiting for, Strategic Road Safety Plan 2022 Annual Report. Lucas Pitts is going to come forward and make a presentation.
Good afternoon. Thank you for downplaying this report for us. No pressure. So I'm going to take you through a couple slides to start. The slides themselves don't have any information that doesn't already exist in the report. So nothing new here, and we'll take questions on it afterwards. First, I'd like to apologize a little bit because this report is a little late coming forward, and we did make a number of changes. I think everybody's probably seen to how we're presenting the information, the kind of information we're presenting. We're going to continue to make those changes annually, but next year the changes won't be so big, so we won't be so late bringing it forward. All right, so welcome to our presentation on our Strategic Road Safety Plan 2022 Annual Report. By introduction, in 2021, the HRP and the RCMP reported 5,031 collisions within the right-of-way, 739 fatal and injury collisions, 160 fatal and injury collisions per 100,000 of population here in the HRM. And this comes to a 13.2% reduction in fatal and injury collisions from the 2018-2019 baseline. So what does that look like on our graph? It shows the desired trend line there in red. And so we were looking for, our target was 20% reduction in fatal and injury collisions from the baseline, which was an average of 2018 and 2019 data by 2023. And so we are trending in the right direction at 160.7 right now. You'll notice the 143.1 in 2020. And as we correctly identify in the report, that was our COVID year. And, I'll just say that data nationally and internationally has been mixed on the impacts of COVID. Some people have seen substantial reductions, others have seen substantial increases. There doesn't appear to be a large trend line showing what COVID did. Certainly there was a reduction in vehicles, but there was often an increase in pedestrians and cyclists, and so it's really a mixed bag out there in terms of what is happening across the country and internationally. So this, again, is in the report already, but this shows the rate of fatal and injury collisions per 100,000 population, a comparison of Canadian cities. So we have the city of Ottawa and their city of Hamilton, city of Edmonton. As you can see, the HRM at 160.7 is doing quite well, but we've always been doing quite well. So traditionally, we're much lower than some of these comparator municipalities. We do use data that we get directly from city staff, and so we did want to expand this comparator, but we didn't get responses in time. So we're going to work to add another couple of municipalities to this chart for next year, but these are the ones we got responses from, so these are the ones we are showing for now. So we did, and I think everybody recognizes since this started, staff has been working incredibly hard implementing projects across the HRM, and so just a quick summary of the 21-22 projects. We did intersection safety reviews and video analytics studies, so anytime there's an accident, we do a safety review on that intersection and make recommendations based on that safety review. The video analytics study looked at 10 of our more serious high-volume intersections. It was a near-miss study, so they provided a number of recommendations as well, and we're going to move forward with implementing some of those in the coming years. Our speed display sign program, we shifted around 15 of those signs around last year. We've added a number of speed display signs to our inventory, so we're developing a program right now that is going to equitably resource those across the municipality and into each ward, so everybody's getting their fair share. They are in quite high demand. So number of new RE5 crosswalks and a review of the pedestrian crossing gaps, the photo enforcement feasibility report, and of course we did have council support through a motion from that a couple months ago. Number of changes to corridor speed management. We updated the municipal design guidelines, which has also been approved by council. Lots and lots of engineering countermeasures, enforcement, working closely with the HRP and the RCMP on the enforcement piece, and that, of course, continues to be an extraordinarily important piece of road safety. And lastly, communications, as I think everybody around the table is aware, the overall budget for the road safety program was reduced, but we do continue to work through our communications through other means, including Facebook and Twitter, and it's a reduced budget, but we are still trying to get stuff out there. So this is just a highlight of the near-miss video analytics study locations. So those are the 10 intersections we looked at to have the consultant looked at. So like I said, they've come up with a number of recommendations for each of those intersections, and we are moving forward with another study to see how best to implement those recommendations, and some of the minor ones and some of the major ones we're just going to implement as part of the next iteration of the road safety framework. So in total, the 21-22 completed engineering countermeasures include 20 LPIs, leading pedestrian intervals, 19 rectangular rapid flashing beacons, 6 accessible pedestrian signals, 109 traffic calming installations, 7 40-kilometer-an-hour neighborhoods, 5 advanced yield lines, which we're calling a pilot, 43 curb extensions, 1.4 kilometers of protected bike lanes, an additional 2.1 kilometers of multi-use pathways, 3.31 kilometers of sidewalk renewal, and 1.12 kilometers of new sidewalks. So this is just a summary of just how much investment and how important road safety is to council. And so you can see that the funding for the road safety program has really amped up over the first 4 years of this program, and we continue to roll out a larger and larger investment every year, and which means a number of, we've really improved how many countermeasures we're putting out there and the amount of stuff we can put out on the roads any given year. So staff is working really hard to get all that stuff done. So moving on to the new projects in 22-23, we're looking at high visibility zebra crosswalks at signalized intersections pilots. Pilot project, you probably have seen some of that out there already. We're working on a left turn calming pilot project. Speed cushions, which were successfully trialed this year, will be rolling out across the city. One of the big things we're doing is initiating the development of the second iteration of the road safety plan, and I think that's going to look a lot different than this first iteration, both on the engagement piece and on the, I would say, I'll call it the focus planning piece. We're going to prioritize school zone traffic calming and review all outstanding school zones, initiate discussions with the province to enable legislation for automated speed enforcement. And so that is another one that is a major priority, and we will continue to push the provinces to move as quickly as they can. We are going to come up with action plans for intersections with the highest number of collisions. Those action plans will be prepared for implementation as part of the next road safety framework. And we'll continue our collaboration with the HRP and RCMP to target dangerous driving behaviors. And we continue, as I mentioned, to sort of update and refine our road safety communications plan. And that is it for my presentation.
Thank you very much, Mr. Pitts. Flip to the other window. Councillor Outthit, if you'd put the motion on the floor.
Happy to do so. I just moved that the Transportation Standing Committee forward the staff report dated October the 21st, 2022 to Regional Council for information. So moved.
Moved by Councillor Outthit, seconded by Councillor Kent.
I would like to say a few words, won't take long, but, and it's largely a good news story, not only the report, but what I'm seeing going on. And I've mentioned this recently to you, Brad, and I have to some of your colleagues, some of your staff, is that I'm seeing now with dealing with traffic services, you know, the willingness to take a sober second look at things and decisions in the past and trying some new things, trying some pilots. Maybe A doesn't work for a lot of good reasons, but let's try B. Some really good communication coming back to councillors and to residents to explaining why something will be done or why it can't be done or what might be done instead. So I've really appreciated this, and I'm sure some of my colleagues have noticed this as well, that we are really, you know, taking this seriously, but also willing to step out of the box a little perhaps and try some new things, be it as a pilot or as well, you know, the crosswalk wasn't warranted there, but then when we realized there was a school or a playground around the corner, we did do another count, and now that there's a bus crossing there, we did do another count, and gee, what, yeah, guess what, it might be warranted now, so we're looking at it, or maybe an RA5 would be safer there or something. So I'm seeing so much of that, and it is really appreciated, so I wanted to get that out publicly and on record. Couple of little question challenges. The LED speed monitoring signs, which I am a fan of. I think it does have an impact on people who care. I don't think it has an impact on people who don't care, but they don't seem to last very long. We seem to be having reliability issues with them, and I know that I've talked to Sarah a couple of times about when will the one be back up on Hammonds Plains Road, or when can we get one on the Bedford Highway. So two questions that I'll have for you, Lucas, ultimately. One is, how are we doing with either them getting them repaired or getting them replaced, because they don't seem to last very long. And secondly, if we have areas in our district that are qualified, meet your standards, can we not, as councillors, like we used to in the past, help you fund those? We used to do them either to the traffic services or to police to actually say, well, Tim, you're right, it's a nice location, but it's not in the budget, we don't have enough, we have to move them around, could I actually fund that? So there's my second question. My third question is, what are we doing with Schools on Hills still? Because we did a whole lot of good work with putting speed humps by schools. Council made that a priority, staff acted on it as they should have, but there are schools that are on hills where traditional speed calming won't work. Where are we with coming up for a solution for schools on hills? Those are my three questions.
Thank you.
All great questions. I'll answer them in order. Yeah, we were having some problems, obviously, with keeping some of the speed display signs working. We inherited a bunch from, I believe it's the HRP, or maybe it's the ZRSMP, I can't remember, and a lot of those came with some problems. And so we did purchase a number of new ones this year. You know, we are hoping with the new ones, and once we get this little batch fixed, that you know, we're going to have a little bit better reliability going forward. It would be nice to have new ones, period. So they should work well. So on the second question about councillors funding, we are in the process, and council will hear about this, of putting together a program for the speed display signs, and how we roll them out, and you know, how we control them, and who has, say, an influence on where they go. And so I would just, I guess, urge you to wait for that one to come out. We're just in the early stages of that, but that is going to be a priority for our second iteration of the road safety plan. School zones on hills, another great question, and I know it's, you know, my short time here, it's come up a couple times, and you know, we can, I don't really have a solid answer for you in that, you know, we don't, you know, we don't have a program, but we're certainly looking at, you know, different methodologies or treatments to deal with that. I know, like, one of the ones we were talking about, you know, potentially like a traffic button or something like that to, you know, slow traffic down as they come down the hill, right? So, you know, it is individualized to each area, but, you know, that kind of infrastructure improvement's quite substantial. It's a lot of money to put them in, and you know, again, I think we'll look as part of the second iteration of the road safety framework to put together a more cognizant plan to fill those gaps.
Just for example, just as a subsequent, then I'll be through, would a cushion sometimes work where a hump or a table wouldn't work, for example, to allow for drainage, allow for visibility, these sort of things? I'm thinking of schools on hills, and I've got a couple of them. And I can understand why a traditional table or hump wouldn't work. I get that. I'm not disputing that. Because of drainage, because of visibility, you know, what have you. But there's got to be something we can do, because it just bothers me that someday there may be an issue on a school. How come all these other schools had humps and my school didn't, or tables and my school didn't? So I hope you will make that a priority to look at some sort of a cost-effective solution.
Absolutely, through the chair, and I think you noticed in the presentation that we are trying to, as part of this year, to address the gaps in the school zone safety plans.
Yeah,
So
yeah.
we will definitely address those gaps.
I was pretty sure you would, but yeah. All right, thank you, and thank you, Chair.
Thank you very much, Councillor Outlet. We'll go to Councillor Cuddle.
Thank you very much, Mr. Chair, and thank you for this presentation. I echo some of Councillor Ohit's comments that, you know, it has been great to see some things revisited and new approaches tried. You've really kind of hit the ground running here, and you know, it's much appreciated. I have some similar comments about some similar topics, in particular the speed display signs. And before the new speed display sign kind of policy was brought in, they were very much utilized by local enforcement for capturing data to help aid in enforcement. So, you know, a great example for that would have been, you know, Purcell's Cove Road, where they used the signs to figure out when the windows of speeding were happening, and we had a discussion about, you know, why it might be that weird time, and they were able to deploy officers to do enforcement, and it was much more targeted enforcement and better, more efficient use of HRP resources in that regard. So they were really a great tool. And in terms of the enforcement side, we don't have that flexibility anymore. And I'm just wondering, moving forward, you talk about working with HRP and enforcement, and I'm just wondering if there's plans to have some of those speed display signs utilized for enforcement data gathering so that we can make sure we're being effective there. The other comment was about the school safety zones. And one of the challenges I have is that the zones are defined where the school fronts on a road and where the cars are. But we have lots of schools that have these, back exits that are pedestrian oriented, where most of the kids are walking, where it's really important to have the cars slow down. But because they're not in front of the schools, they're not considered school zones. And I would love to see the definition of school zones expanded, not just to be focused on car drop-off and buses, but also to look at kind of the walking patterns in the school and where the kids are walking and how we can use that tool to increase the pedestrian safety of children. I have more, but I'm going to just finish with one more question about the multi-use pathways. I think it was 2.1 kilometers were done this year, I think. I saw that in the presentation. I think I got that right. I think one of the best ways to protect pedestrians and people is to get them off the roads. So I know we're, investing a lot in protected bike lanes on roadways, but I also see a tremendous amount of opportunity to create multi-use pathways that aren't always connected to roadways, that are connected to community trail system. So I'm just thinking about the road safety approach, and when we're talking about creating opportunities for people to move around in safe ways in different modes, is there a coordination that's happening between the active transit component and the road safety component to really look at do people belong on roadways, particularly in areas where there aren't sidewalks, which in many of our suburban communities is the case. We're not going to be building those miles and miles of sidewalks anytime soon, based on the budgetary constraints. But anyway, if you had some comments about those questions, that'd be great.
The chair, all great questions again, and I'm not smart enough to answer that myself, so I brought my entourage with me here, and I'm going to pass the first one over to Samantha, because I think she knows about her relationship with the HRP better than I.
Thank you, Lucas. Samantha Trask, Supervisor of Road Safety and Transportation, through the chair to the councillor. So our speed display signs are more meant to have the behavioral impact of drivers and not necessarily for the data collection piece, although they do have those capabilities. We do have other data collection equipment internally, where we have a whole program where we collect speed and volume data, turning movement, intersection counts, all of that. So we can collect that with other equipment, and we see the value in the speed display signs more for having that behavioral impact on drivers reducing their speed rather than for data collection. We have opened the door with HRP and our CMP to let them know that we have the equipment available to do so. We have shared some data back and forth, and they do have access to our internal traffic data counts as well. So that door is open with them, and we do have, we share those discussions through our road safety contact with our HRP and our CMP.
Thank you, and I might have to come back to follow up on that, but I'll wait for the
Yes.
other questions and we'll come back.
I know I set a bad precedent with Councillor Outthit, but I'm on the ball now. Sorry. Go ahead.
Through you, Mr. Chair, to the councillor, Roddy McIntyre, Manager, Traffic Services and Road Safety. And I'm going to address the councillor's question about the school zones. So typically, the school zones are set up along the street where the school fronts, because that's where the majority of the activity takes place with children arriving and departing from the school. However, we have installed school zone areas at locations other than the front of the school, if there is a pathway from another street that is shown that there's a large number of students that are making use of it. So if you do have a location in mind where you believe that there is a high amount of activity of students using a pathway, just let us know and we'll certainly go out and assess it for implementation of a school zone.
Do you have something to add, Mr. McIsaac?
It's green. Yeah, that. David McIsaac, Manager of Active Transportation. So on the multi-use pathway question, I would say yes, multi-use pathways are kind of our overall toolbox for separating bicyclists and pedestrians from vehicles. Usually when they go in off-road, it's part of a greenfield development. It's something that, you know, it's kind of hard to go in and put those in retroactively into an area that's already built. But as new communities get built, it's one of the elements that we look to see. Usually they go through parks, and more we are trying to have those facilities as paved facilities, because that gets you the winter maintenance and helps with the utilitarian kind of travel. And we are looking, I think you know this, looking at some of our multi-use pathways that are in parks that are crusher dust surface and going in and rehabilitating those with some asphalt. So again, to help with that paving and the winter maintenance.
Thank you very much. Staff will go to Councillor Mancini.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Appreciate it. Thank you for the presentation, Lucas. Lucas and Brad, I want to kind of build on some of the comments made before about your staff. I mean, staff have been remarkable and responsive, quick to respond, quick to try to accommodate. Very nice to let me down when the answer is no. But, you know, that's been great. That makes it easier. And I involve them with the residents, and they're quick to get the residents involved. So just want you both to know, thank you. And many of them are here today. Thank you. You're hearing how much councillors like those speed display signs, right, Lucas? We all love them, right? And for a number of reasons. We love them because at least it shows we're trying something, you know, but also I think for those it's like a lock. For those that it slows me down. It reminds me from time to time. Not everyone. So I look forward to that, the new program and how you're going to issue these across the municipalities. And thank you for that. You know, you talked about working with you know, HRP and RCMP with regard to enforcement. But I'd be curious, you know, what does that look like, and what are those conversations? Because we, as we all know in this room, we're coming up to budget, and you know, the chief is going to sit in that chair and say we need more. Yeah, as he did last budget, we need more cops for enforcement, and we gave him none for enforcement. So, you know, what's that conversation that you're having with them? What's that look like when you say you communicate with them? Because we speak to HRP, at least my area, HRP, and saying these streets are a problem, and then I speak to your staff, these streets are a problem, but you know, what does that mean, you know, having conversations with HRP specifically?
The chair to the councillor. I'll just start, and then I think, Sam, if you want to add some stuff, because again, I haven't been here long enough to have a lot of those conversations, but you know, I can say that, you know, we continue to try and emphasize priority areas for enforcement, and you know, I don't know what the right word for it is, but you know, the uptake isn't always there on the enforcement piece. There's no doubt about it. But we continue to work through with both the RCMP and the HRP through the strategic road safety committee and have those conversations. And you know, I get it as much as anybody else. We are also very stretched in terms of, you know, how much staff we have, and you know, how much program we have to deliver. So, but you know, there are complications there, and you know, do we wish that you would go out and enforce, you know, every time we have a priority area? Well, of course we do, but you know, they do have other priorities, and you know, I'm sure they're doing their best to meet our needs as well. So.
Yeah, and that's just when they're not doing their best, but they obviously have constraints if the chief's coming here and asking for 16 cops for enforcement, right? The last point, Mr. Chair, is that, you know, your presentation, thank you. I think you talked about your road safety communications. And I think one of the things that we do terribly at the municipality is sharing with our residents what we're doing good. you know? And so your slide shows us a lot, almost $5 million bucks in investment. I mean, that's a significant investment. And so I'm hoping part of your road safety communications, that's getting out. And looking at the projects we're now looking at for next year, I mean, we should pushing that out. I know as councillors, we'll be doing that in our newsletters and stuff to try to educate our residents. But I really think we need to do a better job of sharing with our residents what we are doing. And could we be doing more, just like police? Absolutely. But we should be sharing with our residents what we are doing and the good stuff that we are doing. You know, almost $5 million bucks is not a drop in the bucket, right? You could use another $5 million. I know that, Lucas, but it's still significant. So just a comment, Tim. Thank you, Mr. Chair.
Thank you, Councillor Mancini. We'll go to Councillor Kent.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. I'll just chime in on Councillor Mancini's compliments for staff. I think out of all my career, there are very few other roles that I'd like to play in a municipality than traffic. You've got your hands full. We rely on you, of course, but it's nice to be able to defer that engineering spec to you. And very grateful for that. And with that, I want to just acknowledge Jody DeBay. She is a champion. She is so able to articulate in very understandable terms to our residents, always quick to reach out to do that when we need them. So Brad, for what it's worth, if you could pass that along, it's really well deserved.
She told me she always your favorite councilor.
Yeah, that was before 2020. And you know what, that comes with that, frankly, that I don't want to chew up all my time giving you all the accolades, but that comes from leadership, that comes from the people around her. I know that. And anyway, just want to say that. Had a great conversation with you yesterday and a few others in the room. So I want to follow up as well a little bit on the potential for hills. You talked about schools on hills, but we also have scenarios, and Brad, this would not be, Mr. Anguish, this would not be a surprise to you. Dorothea Drive, for instance, in District 3, we've done some traffic calming. Then we've got this big slope that was challenging, is challenging, so people are slowed down early, then they pick up and they boot it right down that hill. And so I want to thank you for that speed radar signing data collection that the community was pleasantly surprised to see that go up. So that was really nice. But that's a scenario in communities where I think that we need to be creative and be really looking at those places. And I think one of you just said that's always been a problem. That was you, Mr. Chair. That's always been a problem. So define solutions around that, in particular through these, and even in the red light cameras when they come in and things like that. Can't just be about school zones. The other piece that I want to talk about as well is that another vulnerable group of residents that we all have in our communities are seniors. You know, we want them to be active. We want them to be out walking, and the speeding and the crossings, which we've talked about today, are super important to them. What I do find is I'm getting more concerns in this term with roads that we don't traditionally put traffic calming on because of their designation. And I believe didn't we just have a new version of a speed humps? Were they speed ladders or something that has gone on? Cushions, that's what it is. So are we looking at more ways? I think of even within District 3, Caldwell Road, Calbay Road, Collector Roads, the Baker Drive area, like those kinds of locations are so busy and people are speeding even though there's lots of places for them to stop, but usually they're on a mission. They're in commercial areas, they're in school areas, all of that, but we don't seem to have that capacity to create some traffic calming. So do we have a bit of a plan? Are we continuing to be looking for solutions in those kinds of areas or not? The school zones, before I leave and pass it off to you, school zones are now creating issues, and Brad, we've talked about it, we've seen the location at Horizon, where a school zone is at the end of a tiny little piece of a street road, of a municipal road, and then a long, long, long driveway that seems to be caught into as well into the measurements. so the street that everyone is traveling on where the vehicles are speeding and you know, really traveling fast is not within the school zone, and I think we're talking about that here. But obviously the way that the schools are built, they have you know, that long distance to what you might call the frontage. And I feel like there's some disconnect there. The question I have for it is there a provincial statute or regulation that is also attached to anything related to school zones, or is that exclusively within our capacity to adjust? Because there's schools, provincial schools.
Yeah, without getting too location
Yes.
dependent, I think I understand the situation you're trying to describe. And I think, you know, when council gave us a directive to launch very quickly into what I'll call vertical deflection traffic calming, get as much out there as you can right away. You may recall we said, right on, and schools are our priority, and so we said, hit every school we can with vertical deflections, and we went into those zones. And you're right, in some cases, you end up with a road that's quite long, and then all of a sudden when you hit the school zone, there's the traffic calming for the school. And so, yes, there will be, because of the way we came at this, which was a prioritized approach with school zones, you will see that kind of, to use your words, kind of discontinuity when you're looking at the way the road functions. That will catch up over time as we roll out the whole program. But again, the balance of the road, if you're talking a really long road, the balance of that road is being assessed against all other traffic calming priorities in the municipality, right, as part of the administrative order. As far as provincial, I don't, certainly the vast majority of the roads in question where we have our schools, save for the rural areas, are in HRM's control. Therefore,
Yeah. I know that we've talked about,
Yep.
in particular, that location, and again, this is not meant for that, but in case it's happening somewhere else, that the school zone doesn't seem to be the
problem.
effective area.
Yep.
And so in order to move it, is there anything the province has to be involved in? Because if there is, that would be rotten and awful. But yeah, I'm hoping it would be all, I don't care saying it. It's tough getting them to do anything like that. It is what it is.
Yeah.
And so I'm hoping it's just here, it's within the
Yeah.
municipal.
Let me haul that away. I think I know better what you're saying. Can we move the sign?
Yeah.
And the
well,
definition of the zone?
And part of my impetus for saying this as well today is that I've been working with Jody, and she's raised this again as an issue of how it doesn't fit because of where the school zone, and
Yeah.
it doesn't fit the traffic calming that we want to do on the street that actually brings everybody there.
Yeah.
So we'll leave it there. I'm raising it because I think that I'm following up on that importance of those school zone, that school zone signage does have an impact. I'm probably way over my time. Thank you, Mr. Chair.
So I'm going to rule your comments about the province are allowed. We'll carry on. Moving on to Councillor Stoddard.
Thank you, Mr. Chair, and I want to repeat all of the accolades to Mr. Anguish and his team. They always respond in a timely manner, and they are patient with me to explain the reasons why they can or cannot do what I'm asking. I also try to educate the residents as to why a certain area can be done now and why it has to be, extended into the future, which is very helpful for them. I noticed in the report there was something about what does seasonal installation of temporary speed bumps. Now, I wasn't sure what the seasonal installation would be. Is we talking April, November, and why is it temporary? And my other question is, does it affect the emergency vehicles when it is impacted and then when it's taken away? If you know what I mean. Thank you.
Through the chair to the counselor, so those temporary speed bumps are for a new pilot that we're referring to as left turn traffic calming. So they've just popped up at 5 locations around the city, you'll see. And they are seasonal in nature because they're only bolted into the asphalt. So we have concerns in the wintertime with plows ripping them up. So we did get them installed a little bit later into the year than anticipated. So we're in the middle of October now. So we do plan to remove those prior to the snow season. Our target date is December 15th, and then we'll monitor any snow events before that time. The intent of that pilot is to reduce the turning radius of vehicles who are making that left turn. So for passenger vehicles, they are designed so that the passenger vehicles can simply go around them, just with a reduced turning radius. And then for any larger vehicles, they can traverse over that bump. So they aren't that impacted.
Well, thank you very much.
Oh, another presenter? No? Okay, we'll move to Councillor Diego Gammon.
Thank you very much, Mr. Chair, for indulging a guest to ask a question. Thank you. Councillor Mancini, you might be the favorite councillor. I think I might be the one who's the pest. No, so many questions, right? And I do think that, especially as the first year coming in and all the questions about traffic calming and nobody happy with it and having to answer all those questions and educate a councillor as well as a resident and people still being unhappy, bless you all. Bless you all. But I really was just coming to say thank you in person, and I think that when it comes forward to regional council as information, we should take it off and information and bring it forward so all of council can express our gratitude for your hard work. I do appreciate that. But the conversations about school zones, it triggered for me one of the questions around when you're talking about the speed limit in a school zone, like on the Fall River Road, the speed limit is 60. So when you look at the school sign, it says 50 instead of 30, which is in a lot of the other school districts. So if we could address that and switch it around, just take the 50, make it 30, that'd be great. Thank you.
Well, that's why they need to answer.
Roddy?
Through you, Mr. Chair, to the councillor, the reason behind the difference in the 50 versus the 30 has to do with the speed limit. That is tied to provincial legislation. However, that being said, there's nothing stopping us from reassessing the posted speed limit on that road in that area. If it makes sense to reduce the speed limit near the school to 50, we can do that without provincial involvement if it's a municipal road. We can do that. If it makes sense, we can reduce it, and if it is reduced to 50, then that 50 sign can come off and be replaced with a 30 for the school zone.
Who decides that it makes sense? Because we could decide that. Now it makes sense.
We'll take that one away.
I think it's safe to say that's not a matter for debate on council floor, but I think we all take your point. This is very well made. Thank you for that. I'll go to Councillor Cuttle.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. So great conversation here. I just want to go back to the use of the speed display signs for enforcement and around the issue of data collection. I can give an example specific to my district, though I'm guessing there's other areas like this where there are no other ways of collecting data. Like you wouldn't have traffic lights with collecting data. You wouldn't have, there's just no other mechanism like on Purcell's Cove Road or around the Sambro Loop, Old Sambro Road, Ketch Harbor Road, which is actually a provincial road but policed by HRP. Like there's no way of collecting data other than those speed signs. So they were kind of an integral part when I was talking to the officers on the ground. And I realized that at higher levels, there might be different conversations going on, But, you know, when I had those conversations with the police officers doing the enforcement and the challenges that they experience around the, you know, again, the targeted response, effective use of time, you know, utilizing the resources that they have to have the most impact on the enforcement issues, having that data is key. So I do think there are some gaps that currently exist, and I don't know what the opportunity is moving forward to kind of bring back some of that ability to have those signs available for that collection of data that's only for a 2-week or 3-week period of time, that then helps communicate to the residents what the issue is and helps communicate to HRM and to HRP, like here's the enforcement challenge that we have, and how, you know, what are our options for addressing it? Is it enforcement? Is it traffic calming? Because I don't think that data is coming from any place else. So I mean that is one of my concerns, and just how important that is for a tool, and maybe making it a broader conversation, you know, particularly with those who are responsible for enforcement, to get their opinion and feedback too, because I think what I was hearing was that they were invaluable. And the other, just a quick one, I was surprised to see for the safety network, the road safety network, that there was nothing on there for Herring Cove Road, which I know has a high number of pedestrian collisions on that road. It was one of the worst roads, ranked I think the worst road in Halifax for pedestrian collisions in a few years back. But I was just surprised that there was nothing on that road in the report, or on the specifically for the road safety network piece.
Through Mr. Chair to the councillor, with regard to the speed display signs and collection of speed data. So we actually do have other methods to collect speed data. We have radar devices that just look like a small electrical junction box that can be put on a pole, so drivers don't even know that data is being collected. And what Sam referred to before about conversations we have with police, we've reached out to let them know that we can go in and collect data and provide that information for them to be able to target enforcement in the same way that is done with the speed display signs. So we do have the ability to go in and collect data on those other roadways without having to have a speed display sign in place.
Okay, that's good to know, and especially the agility part, I think, is an important part of that. That I don't know how much agility we have, but that's an important piece.
Okay. Thank you, Councillor Cuddle. Next on the list is Councillor Morse.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. And I would like to thank the whole team as well. I've seen a huge change in the last year in terms of the number of projects and how innovative we are, and the responsiveness of everyone. Your patience is practically legendary, I think. We go over and over the same things, but we're finding new solutions. So thank you very much for that. I remember I think it was day 4 or something that Mr. Pitts was with HRM, and he met me at Lacewood and Dunbrack intersection to look at it. I don't know, maybe it was a whole week you'd been with us, but he was great to come out and have a site visit and look at that intersection, which has now been transformed with zebra stripes and temporary speed left turn calming measures, and the green spikes, and better lighting, and it's just so much better. So thank you very much. And you're also working on Exit Zero, which is going to be much improved. So thank you. My question is just sort of anticipating the budget discussions coming up. And I wondered if you could say a little bit about some of the less expensive measures, RFBs and LPIs, and moving to 40 kilometers an hour, those kinds of lower budget items, and which ones you think are most effective, because I'm hoping we could do maybe a little bit more on that, because sometimes the smaller interventions can make a big difference.
Through the chair to the councillor. Yeah, absolutely, and those will continue to be an important piece of the program moving forward. I mean, we have done a lot of, obviously, our RFBs, a lot of zebra striping and improvements, those low-cost improvements to the pedestrian and vehicle landscape. And so, that'll continue to be an important piece going forward. I believe, we're getting near the end of our RFP program, the initial flush of getting the RFPs out there. So we'll have an opportunity to catch our breath and, give some thought to target more priority areas or places that, that we missed or that we were starting to hear feedback on and things like that. And of course, as part of this, a lot of this is a pilot projects, and so we need to again catch our breath and start revisiting those different tools that we've used over the last 4 and 5 years to see what is working most beneficially and what could work best going forward. So, but there's no doubt, we're always looking at those low cost alternatives. Some of it obviously is very expensive, and we can only do so much of that, and so we are always looking to improve the streetscape safety through these low cost interventions.
Just if I could, one more. So do we have the data? I guess we don't have the data yet to evaluate which of the low-cost alternatives are making the biggest difference.
The chair to the councillor, no, not here. I mean, there's a lot of data out there in the research and things like that typically gives you a good feeling on whether something is going to be beneficial or not. But for here, I mean, it's hard because, we do have relatively, I'll call it few collisions at individual intersections. Like our worst intersection, might be 4 or 5, serious or fatal collisions per year. And so, there's going to be a really big ebb and flow of that per year. And so, to really look back on whether a pilot project is successful, we need a number of years of data, to circle back and say, okay, we have a trend here, and therefore we can see this is working.
Okay, thank you. That's a great point. We actually have pretty low numbers, so it takes a few years to see the trends. That's positive in a way that we have so few. So thank you.
Thank you very much, Councillor Morris. We'll move to her Deputy Worship, Pam Lovelace.
Hello, everyone. Thank you for permitting me to take up some time from your committee, and just want to show appreciation to staff for all the work that you do in answering our very, very many questions, especially those that come from Kingswood on traffic calming, because I know there's a lot. Certainly, we have gained a crosswalk in White Hills Run and lost a crosswalk in Hubbards. 1 step forward, 2 steps back. Clearly, we still have issues when it comes to working with our provincial counterparts on trying to figure out how can we build a safe, viable, connected community when we're only focusing on the urban and suburban areas within municipal control and not having enough influence on those provincial roads. We know that, the school zones are mandated by the province, obviously, but when we dropped the speed on Hammonds Plains Road from 60 to 50, that school zone went to 30. But people don't know what it means if children are present. We really do need to help people understand that the 30 kilometers is for when children are present in the roadway. So I think that we do need to maybe provide some kind of information on our own website that helps, that we can point to. Certainly I send people to the provincial website, but it's just, it is outside of, it's just not helpful, right? I do think we need to help people here in the municipality say Halifax.ca is the place to go for this information with regards to that slower speed in the school zone. And here's why, right? Here's why we need to have that slower speed. Because folks for 30, 40, 50 years have been used to that being a provincial road at 80. And then when it got dropped to 70, people were upset. Then it got dropped to 60, and now it's 50. So we're still trying to help people understand, what it means, what pedestrian safety means, which brings me to my first question. When we think about pedestrian safety, we focus a lot about families and children, but we haven't had the opportunity, I don't think, to do what other cities are doing, which is to look at senior safety. And when we see seniors in a zone or in an area around their housing and so on and so forth, we haven't done that. So I'm just wondering if that's something that's on the radar, whereas other cities have that sort of senior safety zone, because they need longer time to cross the road. they need longer times to be able to get where they need to go. And I just think it's something that we need to consider as our population ages. The other thing I wanted to mention is the question that continues to come up around traffic calming and emergency services. And when we have these 10-kilometer roadways, as we do in Hammonds Plains, with no exit and multiple speed tables or speed humps, it is becoming quite apparent how difficult it is for EHS to get to the back of the subdivision and then to move that patient out of the subdivision with all of those speed humps. So I just wanted to see what kind of conversations we're having with emergency services as we continue to add more traffic calming to these longer roads. Halliburton is another one that doesn't have a back exit. Highland Park doesn't have a back exit. So just wanted to ask the question as to whether or not we have a sense of that. The other thing that I wanted to mention is it would be really, really great to have while I understand the collision dashboard is amazing, and I point people to that, I point people to the roadworks dashboard, which is great when it's been updated. But I think what people are missing is the scope of all of the assets that we have within traffic management. And so every time we add a crosswalk, we watch that number go up. Every time we add more, street lights and so on, or traffic lights, the number goes up. And that's more burden on our staff to upkeep it. So I think it would help people to understand the enormous amount of assets that are being maintained by our amazing staff. And I think that's the last thing, because I'll be talking about Lucasville intersection in a few minutes. Thank you.
Councillor. First on the senior safety zone, I don't think we have anything on the table, but now that you've certainly brought it up, we can certainly look into, if there is areas where we can prioritize, senior mobility, where there's a lot of vulnerable road users. We do work really closely with our advocate groups and making sure that our projects are addressing the needs of our most vulnerable road users. And we are looking very strongly at bringing those advocates and those communities to the road safety table as part of the next iteration of the road safety framework. So they will have a little bit more of a say moving forward in terms of having that avenue to easily share their concerns and identify those priority areas. So hopefully that will be beneficial to everybody. On traffic calming and emergency response, of course, we did just trial the speed pillows this year, which is to the benefit of the emergency response vehicles. So we will be seeing more of those, and we continue to, have pretty good conversations with our emergency response teams, and everything we do is circulated through them for approval and comment. And we were just honestly talking about it today and how we can maybe improve that communication and make them a little bit, part of the earlier process of the planning part of this of these projects. And so we are looking at making improvements there, but everything is approved by them and circulated through them at this time.
If children are present.
That's another story.
Yeah, sure. Yeah, I'll speak to that. There are a number of pieces that council's put on the table. When children are present is a big one. This is one that's been going on for a number of years. We've kept that at the table with the province. We continue to advocate for it. It is a problem. Police will tell you clearly it is very difficult to enforce because they have to do two things. One, to prove the person's speeding, and then at the same time, somehow figure out whether a child was present. It's very difficult for them. So we are and have been promoting specific times of day, as is pretty much standard throughout the country. And so, remains to be seen whether we'll get uptake on this. As you know, we have a number of things in front of them, everything from photo enforcement to 40-kilometer-hour zones to more ability for our traffic authority to set speed limits on below 50 and below. So, and that's just the tip of the iceberg of things we're trying to work with them on. We're just going to keep swinging away. But I can assure you, there is a list from council. I don't have it here, and maybe it's worth bringing back just to let you know. I'll distribute it secretarially to the council, just so you know. There are a number of things that council's brought forward over the years that we continue to advocate for as part, whether it's part of Traffic Safety Act consultations or regulations, or, and we are lockstep with the police on these ones, because of course, anything that helps them be more effective in enforcement gets the game done, so. And I just want to remind council on the, because there's been a lot of talk about emergency services and traffic calming. EHS, so that's the first I've heard EHS has had an issue. I have no problem. I'd love to engage in a conversation with EHS. If there is a particular specific problem in an area, I'd love to hear about it, because obviously I'm concerned. As your AO, your administrative order to staff dictates, emergency services have the veto, more or less, is what that says, that if they're not comfortable at the end of the day, we don't move forward with it. And so I just want to reiterate that is the relationship we have. These are not easy conversations, and they, you know, these things affect response time, but not in the kind of seconds that people who don't like traffic calming would like to have you believe. So I'll leave it at that. And thank you. Good question.
Thank you, Deputy Mayor. We'll go to Councillor Purdy.
Well, that was perfect timing, Mr. Anguish. I was going to actually just talk about some of the points that Deputy Mayor brought up, just the concern with some of the traffic calming issues with emergency vehicle response times, but you've all addressed that, so that's very good. Also a concern with seniors with mobility issues and crosswalk pedestrian signal lights, and just the timing on that. So Deputy Mayor also brought that up too, but I've just been speaking with seniors in my district who feel like it's rushed. They don't have enough time to get across the street, and just even witnessing a senior with a walker, and I'm just there going, come on, hurry up before the light changes, right? Because when they're very slow and they find it difficult to get across. So that may be a consideration moving forward when we do have an aging population. And also, I was wondering if someone would be able to give like maybe a play-by-play plan of how we do get to photo radar enforcement. What are the barriers to this? Like, how many years are we talking? Because I hear different things from different people, and I'm not sure what the answer is. But to me, it seems like this would be the no-brainer solution to a lot of our speeding issues. So, okay, yeah. It's a good one.
2016, that was the best one.
It's a good one.
Outstanding.
I can't possibly follow that. Shoot. Sorry. Oh, right, photo enforcement. All right. So we have made some progress. Forgive me, this is going to be a little bit of an elongated explanation, but it's important that you understand we have made minor progress. So as directed by council, you, I believe unanimously, approved moving forward with photo enforcement. Photo enforcement has a number of applications. By the way, we're looking at it for parking enforcement too. The challenge here is that the province did have it in the act, but was never proclaimed, and therefore, and that's been for a number of years, and of course, it's now outdated. However, so what we did, oh gosh, I'm going to get into another area of that you're going to want to know about, but with e-scooters, with the advent of e-scooters and the challenges there, we needed regulations on e-scooters. So what we did was under your red tape reduction initiative that you have with the province through the Department of Business, we used them to help us, the two public works staff, come together, build regulations in a hurry to deal with the issue. The good news is that bore fruit, and we're actually getting ready to bring back a bylaw to deal with micromobility specific e-scooters as enabled by provincial regulations. Fast forward to the photo enforcement, took the exact same playbook. Mayor wrote, the Minister Maslin has come back and agreed, and that involves the Department of Business as well, that we will come together just as we did for e-scooters and try to develop, review whether we can get something going, I'll say in a hurry. I'd like to put that in there, in a hurry, on photo enforcement. We have not had our first meeting yet. There's a whole process to put together what's called a regulatory priorities table. I know I'm boring you, but the bottom line is the structure's coming together under which we've agreed we are going to work on this. I say this with some enthusiasm because I feel like it did work for e-scooters, and we got through kind of all the red tape, if you will, that involved around these subjects. I'd like to believe we're going to get here too, and just to remind you, we did have the provincial staff sit on our feasibility study for photo enforcement, so this is not entirely foreign to them. They know what's involved. So again, there's probably a lot of hurdles along the way, but we're sitting at a pretty good step, given that the minister has put her stamp on moving forward. So I'll leave it at that. I think it's about as good as it gets right now.
So what would you think would be the estimated?
Yeah, I figured
There's
you'd go
no-
there.
okay.
I honestly don't know. I'd
Yeah,
love to
okay.
think that within a year, we could get pilot legislation or I get this all mixed up. But whatever we need to move forward to have council put a reliable investment in the street, I'd love to be sitting here this time next year and say, we're coming to forward with you with an implementation plan, please fund it. That's where I'd love to be. I honestly,
You don't know.
in the current environment, I do not know.
Okay. Thank you.
Thank you. I'm just going to speak from the chair briefly, and then we'll move to a vote if someone calls a question. So first of all, I also finally want to chime in and thank staff. We are experiencing an unprecedented thing in society right now, post-COVID, where people are just mad about everything all the time. And sometimes that's directed at you, and it's entirely unfairly. And you take it with, I think, Councillor Mancini or Councillor Kent said, with a lot of patience. I think, it was Councillor Dale Gamage who's talking about us. But you also are patient with the public, and I think that's really important in building trust with them. People want to see change happen faster, and when you have $3 billion in built assets, $5 million a year is a lot, or almost $5 million, but it's not a lot when you're talking about trying to change roads that were built what we now would think of wrongly for the last 70 years. That's going to take a bit of time. But, what I'm seeing on, especially in my district where you guys have been so responsive is, more and more I can say the worst areas are being dealt with or have been dealt with. And even just driving down South Park, it's like weird to get teary-eyed when you see the left turn bump outs and stuff on Spring Garden at South Park, but I'm like, they're beautiful. So thank you for that. It's great. I would say, great about Photo Radar, great to hear that. I think that's the key, and the cost has come down so much on implementing that from where it was when we last took a serious look at it. I'm glad that could move forward. I would say to Lucas, especially as someone who just moved here from away, one of our biggest problems with compliance is that the driver's handbook for the province hasn't been updated since May of 2001. I just checked to see if they've replaced it. They have not. So all the things that Dave and his team behind you put in right now, none of them are in the driver's handbook. Like a brand new 18-year-old or 16-year-old getting their driver's license, there's no HOV lanes, there's no bike signals, there's no, bike crossings, nothing that's green, paint on the ground, none of it. And that came up because my mom was like, well, how would I know what any of those things mean? I was like, there is no resource. So I think that goes to what Deputy Mayor Lovelace was saying. Like, if they're not going to do it, we may want to do it, but it isn't really effective for us to do it. The driver's manual needs to be updated. The province needs to make it reflect what's actually going in on the ground. I love the advanced yield stuff, as I said. I really like the zebra crossings going where it's most busy. That's something that I've certainly seen in other cities. I don't think it needs to be everywhere, but where it's warranted, I think that's great that we're going to change that. One of the things that has come up in the correspondence, and I'm going to get to questions now, is what do you think about the potential that our drop in per 100,000 kilometer or per 100,000 people, the drop in the number of incidents per 100,000 people has more to do with the drop in traffic volume because of COVID? I know unlike a lot of cities, we're actually almost back to normal traffic. It certainly feels that way when you're driving around at rush hour. Another question was, and these the two that are related is, one of the big things that was a big change for us was doing the LPIs, the leading pedestrian indicators, at the intersections so pedestrians could go first. And we had a big discussion about that. Reports came back that we were going to try and roll those out more, but you have to coordinate them carefully. It changes timing on whole streets. But so when it comes to this report that's in front of us now, I think being able to better draw through lines from that conversation a year or two ago to where are we at now and where are we going to go in the future, I think that will help with the public part that we were talking about earlier, because I think people kind of lose the thread on where are we going. And the other example, you're talking about action plans for the most dangerous intersections, and I love that. But we, one of the first things we did with Approaching Vision Zero and with Traffic Safety Report was to identify 10 high-risk intersections that we're going to do things on. But and we did them, but the reporting wasn't as clearly identified in the annual reports, I don't think, as it could have been. So there's nothing to easily point to the public to say, see, this is the process, this is how things go. So I think a lot of it is more like we're doing things. What was the phrase that people use all the time? Mary always says, under promise and over deliver. And I think you're doing that, but like, let's be honest, people aren't noticing, right? So I think we need to do a better job in the report of drawing attention. And that's not a criticism. I feel like this is very much like the KPI report we're going to get later on today from Transit, where this committee just gave feedback to poor Patricia, every 3 months for years. And now we love the report because it's exactly what we've asked for and we all think it's awesome, but it evolved a lot. So those are my questions about those. And other than that, thank you very much for a great presentation and a great discussion with council.
Thank you, Steve, for the questions. So the impact of COVID on our statistics, I mean, it's a great question. And like I said, we have done our research and it does appear to be all over the map. And, ironically, you kind of touched on it earlier in that, I think mostly the traffic flows have recovered and we're post-COVID. And I, just talking to my colleagues across the country, I can tell you that, and I think a couple of councillors mentioned this, the number of complaints that are up in terms of speeding and the passionate responses by some individuals in their vehicles to, traffic calming and things like that. I'm hearing from across the country from my colleagues that is all, through the roof. That is, there's just so many people complaining about everything. And so, as much as, you want to sit back and say, well, is it just traffic flows and the volume of traffic on the streets? It's true that does play a part of it, but, I'll call it the cultural attitudes to road safety also play a major part of it. And so I think it's really difficult at this point to measure and really provide you with some guidance on where we are in that. I mean, the big thing, with the HRM and the road safety framework is that, the staff here have done an amazing job, in my opinion, as somebody that's come from outside the organization. And, 4 years ago, we barely had data. And one of the major pieces we put together early on was the accident, the collision database. And, that was all part of staff getting the data as well. And so, we've rolled out a ton of treatments, as you've said. We are learning on the fly. And I think, as I mentioned when I first started, we did a number of changes to how we're presenting this road safety framework this year, and that will continue to be improved, year over year. And once we have a little bit more data, then we can certainly start looking at what were the impacts of COVID. But at this point, so early on in the discussion, I think that's almost impossible. And I think, like I said, most municipalities are struggling with the same thing about where they're going and what's happening on the roads. So on the LPIs, certainly, I almost touched on this in that last answer, that, we hit the ground running and, we rolled out the LPI program. And I think as we move into the next road safety framework, we're trying to be more strategic, more thoughtful, more plan forward in terms of, okay, this is what we're doing, this is where we want to go, this is how we're going to get there. And so when you see it come forward, council will be able to approve, a strategic plan for each of the road safety treatments going forward. It won't be will be a little bit more data rich, so we can make those decisions as staff based on data. And when we started this road safety framework, I think that was a little bit more difficult. So again, I think you'll see an improvement there. On the action plans, you're absolutely right. I had asked for the top 10 worst intersections for, left turn, right turn, pedestrian, cyclist, and what we've done so far, and certainly looking at those lists, we've done a ton on those intersections already. So the action plans will address that. We'll address some how we're going to revisit a plan to revisit those intersections to see if those treatments are working and to address those intersections that have been left off the list. Again, your questions were sequenced nicely because it rolls right back into the LPI thingy in that, we just have to show that, this is the plan for these intersections. This is what we're doing. This is what we want to do. And this is how we're going to get there, right? So that's all coming, and I think you'll be quite pleased as we move forward with this.
I have no doubt. Thank you very much. There's no further speakers on the list. Someone care to call the question? Question's been called. All those in favor? All those opposed? Carries unanimously. Thank you very much. We'll move on to 12.1.2, Dartmouth North Active Transportation Planning Project. We'll ask staff to come forward and get set up, and ask Councillor Stoddart to come and take the chair. Please go ahead when you're ready.
Okay. Good afternoon. Thank you so much to the chair and the committee members for giving me the opportunity to present today. I'm a new face to some of you, so it's great to be here today. And I've really been enjoying the discussion so far around traffic safety, and there's really good segues into what we're going to be looking at here today. So my name is Chloe Kennedy, and I'm an active transportation planner with Public Works. And I've been managing this project in partnership with Englobe and Upland Planning. So the purpose of the presentation today is to provide an overview of the planning process that was used for the Dartmouth North Active Transportation Project, as well as an overview of our cycling route and the design of that route. So this project represents a segment of the Regional Center All Ages and Abilities Cycling Network that was put forward in the Integrated Mobility Plan. So as you folks likely know, each segment of the network requires public engagement to inform the kind of high-level 30% functional designs, and then those designs require council approval before they're moved into more detailed design and construction. So our team uses what's called a functional planning process to develop these high-level designs of the bikeways. So this is an overview of the functional planning process that was used for this project. So when any of our projects are launched, we do some existing conditions research. We then go into phase 1 engagement, and the research and engagement informs the development of our cycling route concept options and designs and evaluation framework, and then we take those concepts back to the public during round 2 engagement to get some feedback on the pros and cons, and then all of that informs the 30% recommended corridor improvements and cycling route that we take forward to council. So that's where we are with this project. So this project had 2 primary objectives, and again, good segues here, to identify improvements for people walking, cycling, and taking transit within Dartmouth North. And the second objective was to determine the cycling route and roadway changes to connect the Burnside Greenway down to the Wise Road bike lanes. So to help you visualize that connection, this is a map of the project area. And at the top of the map, you'll see a dotted blue line that intersects with Highfield Park Drive. And that's the connection to the existing multi-use pathway that ends at Highfield Park Drive near John McNeil Elementary School. The dotted blue line on the bottom of the map connects to Albro Lake Road, and that's currently where the Wise Road bike lanes end at Albro Lake. So this project is making that connection between these 2 pieces of existing infrastructure. So when we launched the project, we had a real close look at the project area, the street grid, the traffic data, collision data, and to further inform our team, of course, the purpose of public engagement, the first round, was to identify, what are some of the key community destinations, how are people getting to those destinations, and what are the barriers to walking and biking to those destinations. So before we launched into public engagement, we had a number of meetings, including one with Councillor Mancini and MLA LeBlanc, as well as a number of stakeholders and HRM advisors to get input and advice on how we should, approach public engagement. And we were advised as much as possible to provide in-person opportunities. Dartmouth North statistically has lower household income rates relative to the rest of HRM. So from an equity standpoint, it was important to provide, community presence, to have the opportunity for people to give feedback in person so they're not relying on, owning personal devices at home. So despite the ongoing challenges with health restrictions last summer, we did have a community presence to gather feedback. So this is a photo that was taken at one of our pop-up events at Farrell Hall. So we kept our engagement questions pretty broad. This map says, what's it like to walk and bike in Dartmouth North? And then we had copies of the paper survey on the table there that folks could fill out as well. It was online. We did community stakeholder interviews with Between the Bridges, North Grove, the Public Library, and various other community organizations, and also lived experience with long-term residents. So one of the community organizations has a residents roundtable. So we were able to talk to long-term residents and hear some of the issues with walking and biking in the community. So to let people know engagement was happening, we harnessed the power of HRM's, Facebook, Instagram, Twitter, to try to drive online traffic to the Shape Your City page with the online survey. But we also needed to reach people that may not be online or have as reliable internet access. So we got a little bit creative and worked with a community artist who installed these colorful painted bikes in various locations around the community that had painted onto it information about the project. So it says, future biking and walking route, have your say, and then with some information on the bottom about how to engage, as well as my contact info. So some of the results from phase 1 engagement that we heard about Dartmouth North was that there's accessibility and safety improvements needed for some of the local streets. Many of the crossings on local streets lack the tactile walking surface indicators or the TWISIes. So this is a photo of Pinecrest Street. So Pinecrest, Brule, and Burke in particular need repaving and curb replacements. So when that happens, there's opportunities for narrowing some of the pedestrian crossing distances, maybe installing some of the traffic calming that we heard so much about today. So that was certainly a big piece of feedback that the community had. Speaking of seniors and families and people of all ages and abilities, Pinecrest and Brule are characterized mostly by multi-residential buildings that have a lot of families and seniors living there. The major theme that we heard from phase 1 engagement had to do with Victoria Road, north of Albro Lake between Highfield Park Drive. So north of Albro Lake, if you're driving outbound on Victoria Road, it turns into 2 lanes in each direction with quite fast-moving traffic, even though the posted speed limit is 50. People tend to drive a little faster than that through this piece. So of course, there's a feeling of lack of community connectivity on either side of Victoria Road as a result of the fast-moving traffic. So this is a photo of the pedestrian bridge that goes over Victoria Road, which you've probably noticed driving outbound. So while it is a valued piece of pedestrian infrastructure, it wasn't necessarily seen to meet all of the active transportation needs kind of between Primrose Street and Highfield Park Drive. Also, some residents reported not feeling personally secure traveling on the pedestrian overpass by themselves at night. And the wire fencing, as you can see here, is unsightly and sometimes counter to the existing pedestrian desire lines and community destinations. We also heard about constant speeding on major roadways and intersections. So again, this is a nice overlap with the conversation that we were just having around intersections and leading pedestrian intervals. This is an aerial photograph of the intersection of Highfield Park Drive and Victoria Road. So in the top right-hand corner of the photo, you can see what looks like the corner of a baseball field. That's on the grounds of John Martin Junior High. And on the bottom left-hand corner of the photo, you can see dense row housing and a neighborhood cul-de-sac that ends. So when we had a pop-up event at the Dartmouth North Library on Highfield Park Drive, we were speaking to one of the parents, and she regularly walks across this intersection with groups of children who are getting from this residential area up to the school. And you have to cross about 30 meters or about 100 feet of space with 6 lanes of traffic. So it's, the intersection is convenient if you're in a car, but if you're walking through the intersection, you can see some of the residents' concerns. So the feedback from phase 1 engagement helped our team develop some concept options for what to look at. So the first concept looks at a cycling route down Highfield Park Drive, making that corner onto Victoria Road and then down Albro Lake Road. So this option was attempting to address some of the issues that we heard with the intersection of Highfield and Victoria, as well as some of the pedestrian access issues. The second route that we looked at was Lehman Drive. So that's the road at the top of the map in the light blue, and then straight down Primrose Street to Farrell Street. So the intersection of Farrell Street and Victoria Road is another one that we heard a lot about. So that's a local street that meets 4 lanes of traffic at Victoria and currently doesn't have, a crosswalk or any lights at it. And you have a lot of pedestrians making that crossing at an unrestricted or at an unsignalized intersection. So this design was attempting to address some of those concerns. And then the third option that we took forward was some local street improvements, so looking at traffic calming, local street bikeway options, and then having pedestrians and cyclists go over the existing Victoria Road overpass down through Farrell Park to Wise Road. So the purpose of phase 2 engagement was to take these concept options back to the public, back to the stakeholders, to get feedback on the pros and cons. So this is a photo that we took at our neighborhood stakeholder meeting, which Councillor Mancini joined us for up at the Dartmouth North Library. So we had MLA LeBlanc there as well, plus some long-term residents of Dartmouth North, including a youth and a senior and some other folks, just to discuss these options and talk through pros and cons. We also took these designs to the cycling advocacy groups, Bicycle Nova Scotia, Cycling Coalition, Walk and Roll. We did a focus group. Of course, we had our surveys. We did a presentation to the grade 9 students at John Martin Junior High. Early in the planning of this project, they had conducted a walkability audit of the area. So this was kind of, taking these designs back to that school and having a discussion. And we also gave a presentation to the Islamic Association, to the mosque up on Lehman Drive, which Councillor Mancini also joined us for. We kept him busy with this project. And we had our online promotion, and we also mailed out letters with these concept options to 5,100 residences in the Dartmouth North area. And of course, we kept our art bikes installed in the community to promote the project. So in addition to the public feedback, we also developed 8 evaluation criteria. And these criteria were weighted according to the Complete Streets hierarchy that was laid out in the Integrated Mobility Plan. So that's giving the most weight to improvements for people who walk, cycle, and take transit. So just quickly, we'll go through the evaluation criteria. So we looked at pedestrian movement and safety, bicycle, collision risk management, kind of the environmental security that cyclists or pedestrians would feel. We looked at transit and vehicle accommodation, parking accommodation, trees and green space, and implementation feasibility. So after phase 2 engagement was finished, we evaluated the routes using the criteria. We looked at the What We Heard report that summarized all the different feedback that we received, and we came up with our preferred recommended cycling route and facility type. So this route has the two of the major advantages for residents of Dartmouth North is adding a new signalized intersection to Victoria Road at the crossing of Farrell Street. So even though this intersection is only located 70 meters from the intersection at Primrose, there's still pedestrians that, that use that intersection to cross, that aren't going to walk 140 meters out of their way to make that trip to the lights when they're in a rush. As there's 2 transit terminals on the either side of the road that we'll have a look at a little later in the presentation. So there is a lot of pedestrian traffic that's generated at this intersection. And this design also improves the existing crossing of Victoria Road at Highfield Park Drive. So as you'll notice, this is a change from the suggested route that was put forward in the Integrated Mobility Plan. But what we heard from residents was, the Victoria Road overpass is already a relatively safe, collision-free crossing of Victoria Road. But this is an opportunity to look at more improvements, more crossings of Victoria Road. This design also adds a missing sidewalk on Victoria Road between the Brule Street Park and the Highfield Park Drive intersection. So that would be, we'll have a closer look at that as well. It was also seen to be more direct for cyclists with fewer turns, a bit straighter. And the recommended facility type is an on-street, on Highfield Park Drive anyway, recommended bidirectional bikeway. So this is a cross-section of what Highfield Park could look like. So this has a bidirectional bike lane on the right-hand side or the south side of Highfield Park Drive. So a bidirectional bikeway stays on one side of the street and allows bicycle travel in both directions, as opposed to, you know, the skinny lanes on both sides of the street that have unidirectional, travel in one direction. So going down Highfield Park Drive, this is kind of a point of view picture of the existing intersection. So you can see the 6 lanes of traffic there on Victoria Road. And the proposed intersection changes actually look at the removal of the right-hand turn lane to decrease the crossing distances for pedestrians at this intersection. And then that space would be repurposed into a bidirectional bike lane to allow active transportation users to turn from Victoria Road onto Highfield and vice versa. So this also adds a missing sidewalk connection. So on the right-hand side of this picture, there's no sidewalk currently from the corner of Highfield Park Drive down to the existing pedestrian overpass. So this would add in a missing sidewalk segment and bidirectional bikeway. So moving down Victoria Road, this is what Victoria Road could look like. So this project wasn't looking at the vehicle lanes themselves. As you can see, there's almost 32 meters of right-of-way. So this design looks at putting the bidirectional bikeway beside the sidewalk off of the street. Since there is lots of room to play with, which is an engineer's dream when it comes to these kind of designs, to have lots of road space instead of too little. This is what the corner of Farrell Street and Victoria Road currently looks like. As you can see, there's those transit stops on either side, and this does generate a lot of pedestrian traffic. You have the Boys and Girls Club on Farrell Street at the corner. On the other side of Victoria Road, you have the medical center, the family food center that also has daycare programs, and a lot of families and children crossing the road. We did a pop-up event on Farrell Street, and one of the children, the little girl, said that her and her brother run across this intersection almost daily. So there's certainly a lot of improvements that could be made. So one of the proposed changes that we were looking at was adding a new signalized crossing of this intersection, and also widening the pedestrian median in the middle of Victoria Road to kind of facilitate that safer crossing. And we'd be looking at a half signal. So a half signal is the kind of traffic signal that you see at the corner of Oxford Street and Allen, and also at the corner of Gladstone and Almond Street. So they're kind of, we're branching out more into half signals, but there's not a whole lot of them yet. But they're great for accommodating cyclist and pedestrian crossings. So Farrell Street, this is a cross-section of what Farrell Street could look like, with the bidirectional bikeway continuing from Victoria Road, crossing the street down onto Farrell. So for the sake of kind of facility continuity, we did recommend the bidirectional bikeway. However, we do need to do additional consultation work with residents on Farrell Street and people in that community. After we had our recommended design, I went back to the community and presented the designs. We had pop-up events. I dropped off letters to the residents, and we also left these maps at the Boys and Girls Club, the North Grove, the library. And when we had our pop-up event on Farrell, we did have some opposition to the bikeway and some concerns for the functionality of the street. So we will be going back to the community during preliminary design to kind of have a bit more of a discussion, look at design options, and either confirm this type or select another all ages and abilities facility type, which could be a local street bikeway or a multi-use pathway for this block and a half section of Farrell, just to connect the intersection down to the park. So for the park itself, we're also looking at a paved bidirectional bikeway through the park. So this is a bit of an aerial photo showing the existing granular pathways that are through there. So we'd be adding in a bike lane through there as well. So the final section of the route is the Farrell Street Walkway. So this design would be looking at adding in a bidirectional bikeway beside the existing paved walkway that you see in the photo here. So there's also a lot of, complete streets recommendations for Farrell Street Walkway. The fence and the lighting doesn't exactly have much of a neighborhood feel. Farrell Park itself had a lot of work done. Councillor Mancini was instrumental in having that done in 2018 when there was a community tragedy, and there was improvements done, better lighting, some landscaping, a memorial monument. But there's certainly more work that could be done in this area to kind of improve the environment and the sense of security for pedestrians especially. So that concludes the overview of our recommended AAA biking route and design. But I did want to mention a couple of other recommendations that came out of this project. So for some recommended complete streets improvements for some of the local side streets, better lighting and more trees in more locations was something that was seen as desirable by long-term residents. Also, as I mentioned earlier, some opportunities for traffic calming. So there's curb bump outs for narrower crossings. Brule Street and Pinecrest Street are up for recapitalization, so we're already kind of in touch with the design engineers. And it was mentioned to us that, the tactile walking features are a new design standard, so those will be implemented anyway when the streets are recapitalized. And another major recommendation that's coming out of this planning study was that a multimodal corridor study for Victoria Road is needed. What we heard from residents was that, adding in a bikeway to the right-hand side of this photo on that grassy area doesn't necessarily address the bigger issues of speeding traffic and some of the, unsightly conditions that are currently there. So there's a lot more opportunities to bring this up to more of a complete street standard. There could also be an analysis of traffic volumes to assess vehicle lane requirements. And Transit does have plans also for Victoria Road as part of the rapid transit strategy to add in dedicated bus lanes on Victoria Road. So that concludes my presentation, and I'm really excited to stay involved with this project as it moves forward to help kind of guide and advise, and I'm excited to see what's down the road, so to speak, for Dartmouth North.
Yes, please. Just having an issue here. Thank you. Thank you, Councillor Mancini. Would you like to put the motion on the floor, please?
Just waiting for, there we go, here we go, thank you. Madam Chair, happy to do so. Put the following motion on the floor that the Transportation Standing Committee recommend that Halifax Regional Council, 1, approve the installation of a 2.2 kilometer of bicycle facilities in Dartmouth North through Farrell Park, Farrell Street, Victoria Road, and Highfield Park Drive, as described in the discussion section of the staff report dated October 13, 2022, and 2, direct Chief Administrative Officer to consider planning and implementation of opportunities for the other Dartmouth North mobility improvements, including a corridor functional plan for Victoria Road and local street enhancements as identified by this planning study and described in the discussion section of the staff report dated October 13, 2022. So moved. Thank you, Councillor. Thank you, Chloe, for the presentation. And Chloe, thank you for your enthusiasm for this project, recognizing this community. It's a special community, and adapting your engagement with them. It really made a difference to the community. I thank you for that. So there's a lot here. Dartmouth is excited to seeing this. We haven't, in this particular area, we haven't seen these types of conversations about active transportation and moving people around. It's been around them, but they haven't seen it, so they're excited to see that. And we're seeing a lot more in Dartmouth now. And there's more studies coming, and this committee will see more of that in the near future. So, and I know Councillor Austin and I have had many conversations about the connectivity between our two districts. So that is exciting. I'm also very excited about the other stuff that you identified. not just the pathway and the active transportation. And the fact that Lucas is here with his team, and I'm hoping they caught some of this, and I'm really looking forward to that. Identifying Albert Lake and Victoria Road and Victoria Road challenges. These are serious challenges this community. We've had incidents just recently in Dartmouth North where crosswalks, and this week where there's a pedestrian accident, and so the fact that you're looking at this from an active transportation perspective, but you've identified other challenges is very encouraging, and I'm excited about that. I will tell you that a Victoria Road overpass that you showed in your presentation, Lucas and I have chatted about that, and they are going to put some lights on that to just add to that safety perspective, so that's fantastic. And they're recommending the gaps in the sidewalk. Really excited. The bi-directional sidewalk, that approach makes so much sense. There's so much space. I mean, like you said, I think in engineering, from an engineering perspective, the slate is wiped clean. You can go at it. So very often, especially in the core, we're so challenged because the roads are much narrow. And for me, it's also not only about active transportation, it's about helping, by adding all this, it'll help to calm those streets and to make it more safe. I guess my only question is, and I'm not sure how you answer this, you or Dave, on it. It's with regard to what's the timing and the process of all this. You've got a whole lot going on here, which is good. We are moving into budget again. I've said that already in the previous presentation and conversation we had. How does that work? How does things line up? When do I have to advocate for this in the budget time? I mean, now that you've shown it and you've piqued my interest and the residents' interest, well, can we have it all tomorrow? All right, that's what we're looking for. So if you could maybe explain, how does that work?
Okay, thank you for your comments and for the question. Because there are so many opportunities for improvements, especially along the major roadways in Dartmouth North, a lot of different departments have a lot of interest in this area as well. Some of these issues around Highfield Park Drive at Victoria and Victoria at Farrell were even identified in the center plan, where Victoria Road received corridor designation and Highfield Park Drive was identified as a major center. At the corner of Victoria and Highfield, there's a library, a community center, transit terminal, junior high school, and the roadway network isn't necessarily a comfortable environment per se for pedestrians and cyclists. So, where transit also has an interest in the dedicated bus lanes, and where the Transportation Planning Group has an interest in a corridor study for Victoria Road, it's difficult to say kind of exact timelines of how that will play out, but certainly we'll be continuing to meet with the other departments and integrating the plans moving forward. Maybe Mr. McIsaac can speak a bit more on that piece.
David McIsaac, Active Transportation Manager, through Madam Chair to the Councillor. So right now we're looking at 2024 for implementation. Of course, that is, there's still some work to do to make sure that that's feasible and in the budget and that kind of thing. But Highfield Park Drive is up for some rehabilitation work. Farrell Street is up for some rehabilitation work. So those are great opportunities for us to kind of collaborate with our rehab partners within the municipality and look for implementation of that. I think it's going to be within the next couple of years. It's looking positive, but we'll know for sure as we get closer to that budget year and that kind of thing.
Yeah, thank you both. Again, I think there's a lesson here for other business units and how we engage with communities. It can't be a cookie cutter, right? We have to look at the community that we're trying to engage with. And whether that's planning, I know the folks from Transit are going to get up here and speak, we have to look at the community. How do we engage? How do we have more people involved? So good for you guys, and Chloe, thank you for that. I support the motion on the floor and ask for my committee members to support it also. Thanks very much, Madam Chair.
Thank you, Councillor Mancini. I have Councillor Kent, please.
Thank you, Madam Chair. I'm happy to support this. I think I want to tell you how much I appreciate hearing your presentations and seeing the depth of work that is being done for these active transportation corridors. They really are the essence of often what we talk about here, whether it's on a sidewalk or connectivity. We want our communities to connect to each other. It is really making the fabric of the community, continuity of utilizing their local spaces. But it's really important for us to encourage these kinds of relational spaces within the neighboring communities that they might not otherwise have opportunities. So really, really important. So I want to commend you for that. I also love the way that we are presenting, and really, I think, and from what I've seen on the Woodside Shearwater connector so far, and what I see coming out here, is that the piece around really listening to the community and having that continual dialogue, and just the fact that we saw on your list of how you're going to come up with this at this stage. But did I hear it right that you were going back one more time after we get some? Yeah. So I love that. I love that. It's really, really important that the community understand it, buy into it, are proud of it, and even if there's nuances to what they haven't, that they may or may not like, can't please everyone, but they will, I think, be part of it. They will feel connected to it, and therefore, I believe they will use it. If you build it, they will come. That's a real thing, and I think this is a perfect example of it. We do in our communities, and I know other councillors probably have heard it, we do have naysayers who are talking about, why do you need all this? Why do you need all this? I don't see any bikes. Well, that's the point. I don't see anybody walking on those corridors. That's the point. We want them to, and I'm literally typing an email to you around some other things that for the future. So I'm going to make sure you have little job security, which won't be a surprise to you, David, because we've talked before about it. So I'm happy to support this. I think this is the right direction for us as a municipality. And I think as well, I think it is a shout out to the community entities who have really laid the groundwork on the Rails to Trails concepts and development within our communities, because they blazed the trail for a lot of what we now are linking together and creating. The fact that you can travel from Eastern Passage down the Eastern Shore, and now folks soon will be able to take it all the way through to Halifax. Like that's extraordinary, and they were big players in it. So, and I know you folks have engaged in that, and so I think you're really amplifying the importance of community participation. So thank you for that. Happy to support it.
Thank you, Councillor Kent. I don't see any more speakers. Is there any? Oh, I'm sorry. Sorry about that. Councillor Cuddle, go ahead.
Thank you, Madam Chair. And I just want to say thank you so much for this presentation. It's very exciting to see these initiatives happening in communities the way that they are. I think other councillors have spoken to the approach that you've taken, and it's fabulous. I'm particularly excited when we start to see active transit networks become a key component of community development. In particular, when you start to talk about looking at key destinations within a community and how you can connect people within a community to those destinations in a safe and efficient manner. I think that's amazing, and it ties into the road safety work that we're doing and all the other pieces. So I think that's fantastic. Build it and they will come. Not always. When it's done properly, I agree. But, I think it has to be smart, it has to be informed, and it has to be reflective of the particulars of the community, like all the things that have been mentioned. So, I think continuing to do this in a smart and strategic way is critically important to the long-term success, not just here, but, wherever we're working on community active transit plans, which brings me to my next question, which is a lot of this is related to the regional center active transit network. And, as we, begin to complete major sections of that, when and how do we start to expand that out to, the communities outside of the regional center who also need that community development component, particularly in communities that aren't easily walkable, where things like, pathways, where things like, cycling lanes would not only facilitate, a more active life for students getting to school, people getting to the grocery store, to ride their bike or to walk instead of getting in their car to go get some milk. In particular, this community development aspect of it. Is there a plan after the regional center to take this to other growth centers outside of the regional center?
Through you, Madam Chair, to the councillor. So I'd say it's to a certain degree we are. I mean, we do a lot of work in I guess, more suburban communities. We have a big initiative for rural community center sidewalks that we got started with this year that's really going to ramp up next year. Obviously, the regional center has been a bit of a focus from a kind of all ages and abilities bikeway perspective and making those connections. That's coming to the IMP, and it's related to center plan and having sort of transportation options available for that area. I would say probably the next opportunity to really kind of maybe focus and assess and maybe reassess some priorities along that line will be looking to see what we do with the active transportation priorities plan going forward. The current active transportation priorities plan its term will end in 2023. We'll be doing a bit of an update and some options for where we go next, but hearing that comment kind of gives me a sense of where some of the ideas or some of the energy might be for kind of how we set priorities for the next 5 years and potentially what we do outside the regional center for sure.
Yeah, and I totally acknowledge the work that's being done with the rural community piece. I think that's important. But again, it's like, I think when I look at this, I see the Dartmouth North Active Transportation Plan and how it's not just a path to, connect to downtown, but it's a network within the community in and of itself, and how important that infrastructure is to, today, but in particular to the future of our communities, particularly those growth areas. I think it's critically important that we do start thinking forward, and where do we go next, and how do we, prioritize, communities and identify them and prioritize them to make sure that, we have a continuum of this work. So, thank you.
Ready for the question? Okay. Sorry. Oh, sorry. All those in favor? Those opposed? That motion carries. Thank you. Moving on to 12.1.3, Hemmons Plains Road and Lucasville Road, intersection improvements, and we have a motion. Deputy Mayor? Oh, I'm sorry. I see you here and I just assume. I'm sorry, would somebody like to put? Oh.
On the floor for her, if you like.
Thank you.
I'll put the following motion on the floor, that the Transportation Standing Committee recommend that the Halifax Regional Council direct the Chief Administrative Officer to, 1, prioritize short-term operational improvements to the signalized intersection, including upgrades to the traffic controller, cabinet, and vehicle detection along the updated signal timing plans, and 2, ensure appropriate longer-term intersection modifications, including accommodation of the pedestrians, cyclists, and transit, are appropriately planned for through the development review process. So moved. I'll defer to the Deputy Mayor on comments at this point in time.
Thank you. Deputy Mayor Lovelace?
Thank you, Madam Chair. Well, I'm glad I showed up. So thank you for this report. I really do appreciate it. It is something that has been quite a significant bone of contention for the community, both of Lucasville and Hammonds Plains, and all of those residents who find themselves sitting in traffic for 45 minutes trying to either get home or get to work. This is a bottleneck, and as you can see from the drawing, when the road was widened in 2012, had there been, I think, a right turning lane, going into Lucasville for the outbound traffic, that might have been helpful. But at this point, what we see is the storage lane inbound. While I understand the report says that it's good enough, I'm going to tell you it's not. It is absolutely not good enough because that traffic can be backed up from Lucasville all the way to Pukwak Road. And that, we've got, 20,000 plus vehicles on this road every day. So what I'm wondering, and I'm happy to speak to this at council, looking forward to this going to council, but I guess my question is, when we're talking about short-term potential to address some of these issues and alleviate the congestion, I have the feeling that we're actually just waiting for development to happen rather than address the problems that we have today. And so by waiting for development, what we're going to do is actually compound the problem by having another 300 plus units at that corner. The other thing that the report doesn't address is the high the height of the right turn from Lucasville onto Hammonds Plains Road. That brick wall or that rock wall that's there has actually caused a dip in the roadway. So as you're making that right turn, you're going down and then up. And there's a bus stop there. And so anybody who wants to cross that road, cross Lucasville and Hammonds Plains Road, is taking their life in their hands. It's absolutely not safe. So, I think by playing around with the timing of the lights, that's helpful. It should have been done before. But, the map where it says to move that signal pole to be relocated, I would actually suggest that is more urgent to get that right turning lane sooner than later. So, I'm curious that in the plan, we didn't really have a better understanding of this actually being in the service boundary. The report states that it's not in the transit boundary, but it is in the service boundary because the Halifax Water extension goes to the corner of Lucasville and Hammonds Plains Road. And so I'm just trying to get a better sense if there's someone here that can answer some questions about that service boundary and and just thinking about how easy it would be to get that right turning lane in, because the property's there now, the space is there now to make the adjustment, rather than just make a turning lane, or rather than just make the adjustments to the traffic lights.
Thank you, Deputy Mayor. I believe Jill Morrison is here for questions. Thank you.
Good afternoon, Roddy McIntyre, Manager, Traffic Services and Road Safety. I'm going to address initially just the question about the service boundary. Through you, Mr. Chair, or Madam Chair, to the Councillor. The service boundary that's referenced in the report is the transit service boundary, not the Halifax Water service boundary. They're different.
Yeah, no, that's my point, is that the service boundary is a service boundary, right? So the fact is that those folks are in that boundary, they're paying that tax. Whether what I'm suggesting is we're saying that they're not in the transit boundary, but they're in the service boundary, right? So, those lines are going to be laid, those lateral lines are going to be laid in the future. So what I'm suggesting is we need to start thinking about what that plan is for this. And waiting for development isn't going to benefit the background traffic and all of the traffic that's building in the rest of Hammonds Plains if we're only focusing on this and waiting for this development to come forward. So I feel like we've got the cart before the horse in that we're going to wait for this development to determine what this intersection looks like in the future. And maybe it comes down to finances. Maybe it's because there's capital cost contributions that we're waiting for. Is that the million-dollar question?
It wasn't necessarily related to cost, more so to get their plan and the impacts that that development was going to have. And so once they have their traffic impact study submitted and the recommendations are laid out from that report, then those could be, evaluated. Are those a move forward right away, or, how far out is the development? Should we do those ahead of time, or could we wait for those to be done full cost of the developer? So it was more just, we didn't want to go in, make a bunch of changes, which may not be sufficient once we get the development plans in our hand.
Right, so again, we're waiting for development plans rather than recognizing what's actually going to happen right now, today, with the traffic that's on the road. We don't know when they're going to build. They might not build for another 15 years. Does that mean we're going to wait for 15 years because we don't have a functional plan? So, I just caution that approach of dictating what our infrastructure looks like because a developer has said that they might build at that corner.
Again, through you, Madam Chair, to the councillor. So if it turns out, and we have a good relationship with our development colleagues, so we can reach out to them and find out to get a good sense on if there's anticipated activity near term or longer term. If it's 15 years out, no, we're not going to wait for 15 years, for sure.
Yeah.
And regarding the question about the right turn lane from Hammonds Plains onto Lucasville Road, face value, when you look at it, it looks like the space is there, but we don't own all that space. In order to actually be able to build the right turn lane, we would require property acquisition because the utility relocations have to happen as well. The utility poles are in the way, so they need to be pushed back. We need to buy property. There's the ditch there would then have to be piped and infilled. So I know on face value, a lot of times you look on the ground, hey, it looks, we just go in there and do it, but there's oftentimes property lines that don't show up. So there's more to it, and the short-term items that we can look at is repairing and improving the vehicle detection, which will help the lights work better to address the traffic demand.
Right.
And same thing with the signal controller and some of the line marking work that we can do to provide more storage space for the inbound traffic on Hammonds Plains Road to help deal with that spillover.
Okay, and I do understand that, but this is the same conversation we had in 2012 when the road was widened. And the community said, please give us a right turning lane. And those were the reasons that they said, no, you're not going to get one now. So 10 years have gone by. See my frustration? 10 years have gone by and we still don't have a right turning lane. And now the community is told, well, we're going to wait and see what this developer is going to do. So again, without an actual functional plan for this roadway and getting a better sense of the background traffic, right? And I know that we've got some data that's coming to give us a better understanding of what's happening with the traffic. But we've also got the Wild West happening in Upper Hammonds Plains, where there's like dozens and dozens and dozens of units being built that aren't counted into this new traffic study that's coming down the pipe. So I just think that maybe what we need to do is take this offline and have a conversation with development and get a better plan in place. In the meantime, I look forward to this going to Regional Council, and maybe we can have a bit more information at that point. How much background traffic are we actually talking about? Because the other thing that we have to think about is the graveyard. That's on the other side of that lane where the church is as well. And think about what's going to happen there. Because those graves are right up against the right-of-way. Okay. Sorry?
They're not complaining.
They're not currently complaining, no, but they're also not paying taxes. No, thank you so much for your time on this, and I look forward to continuing the conversations. And thank you, Madam Chair, for giving me space and time today.
Thank you. You're most welcome, Deputy Mayor. And
do you mind just stating your name for the record, please? Sorry.
Sorry, Jill Morrison, Supervisor, Traffic Services.
Thank you so much. And we'll go now to Councillor Kent. Thank you.
Thank you, Madam Chair. So I'm struggling with supporting this at this stage, and because I feel like much of what has just taken place and councillors' comments are all really relevant to a particular thing, operational piece in their district that we all are doing, often bring to staff within our own roles. And I would struggle with the wording on prioritize, ensure, that kind of wording without having, and based on the conversation or the dialogue that just happened, there seems to be a lot of missing information on really what it is that we would be voting in favor of at this stage to bring it to council. To utilize this opportunity to push it up to council with this kind of language, with hopes of having more information for council, I think I couldn't support it like this. I'm certainly usually always the first one to say our local councillors in our local areas know our community best. I'm also struggling a little bit with language that frankly I am hesitant to use on trying, sort of positioning it such that our engineering folks and our people who are much more skilled and experienced at design, operational pieces, that I would know better than that. That wouldn't be my background. I can't speak for Councillor Lovelace because, you know, she's got her own background and knowledge base. The last piece that I would speak to is the language around prioritizing. This is not going to come without a cost, any of these kinds of changes, without, I feel a little bit like it's preempting some of our conversations that would be had at budget debate. And we all have, as councillors, we all have things in our communities that are similar to this that we're all trying to advocate for. I just feel like it's kind of like jumping the queue a little bit. So I'm not going to be able to support it as it is right now. Be happy to revisit it if it comes back with a different approach. But for today, I don't think I can support it.
If I could, I'll just speak to one aspect the councillor has concern with, and that is the prioritization. Just to be clear, the prioritization recommendation does not have a financial implication. It's basically within existing financial authorities' budget and is going to happen. So I appreciate your point, though. So I wouldn't call it queue jumping in this particular case. So I'll just provide that.
Thank you, Mr. Anguish, and I have Deputy Mayor.
Thanks, I appreciate that. Yes. Oh, hey, go right ahead.
Pardon me, Councillor Mancini, go ahead, please.
Thank you. Sorry, just very quickly, Brad, maybe on that. I mean, I guess my question is, does it need a motion? I mean, can this just be a conversation carried on with you and your team? Does it react any differently if it's a motion versus just having that conversation?
Well, I think the key thing here, and Councillor Kent was basically expressing her discomfort with moving it to council as is. Like I say, hopefully I've helped with the prioritize piece. What I'm hearing is that from the area councillor is that she'd like more flesh on the bones of this before it reaches regional council. I think I heard you say a meeting with our staff and planning before it got to council would be helpful. And then, not to put words in the local councilor's mouth, but at that point, perhaps if the advice that staff has given and the recommendation that we've given, if they do not meet the needs, then I would anticipate there would be a follow-up motion directing staff, for example, to do something. I'll just throw it out there. Build a right turn, come back with a report to talk about build a right turn lane in the year 2000, whatever, right? But we would expect that this advice would get further shaping from council if it's not hitting the mark. That's.
I'm just wondering if the deputy mayor would be interested in just deferring this and have that conversation and then come back and say, okay, now it's time for the action. Any missing gaps are filled in.
And correct, I should be clear, the committee could do that as well, right? It doesn't necessarily have to get past this point. The committee could send it back and say.
Sure. So I'll leave that. I know the deputy mayor is interested in just have that deferral go off and have that conversation and then come back when you have all those gaps filled. Thank you, Madam Chair.
Thank you, Councillor Mancini, and I have the deputy mayor, please.
Thanks so much. Yeah, I don't think there's enough meat on the bones, as that was my gist of what I said earlier. To prioritize short-term operational improvements to the signalized intersection should have been done years ago. So the fact that we've got a report here saying that we should do the work that we should be doing anyway, I don't think is necessary. I think what's necessary is we get that right turning lane in. I think that is the most important thing for us to be doing. So if the committee wants to defer this until we can have some more time to put more meat on the bones and get a better look at what we can do within this intersection, there's a surplus piece of land there as well that we need to talk about, and so I would support that, but not if it means that I'm not going to get the operational improvements that are desperately needed at that intersection. Thank you.
Thank you, Deputy Mayor. And Councillor Kent, please.
Yes, thank you. Thank you, Brad, for that clarification. That's really helpful for the first piece. I do think a deferral would be, I would like to put a deferral up, and I think that we're all getting to the same place, which is there's more information that needs to be part of a motion that would go to council. So does that have to be a deferral with a time frame, and does that have to be a supplementary report?
No, I think it's just deferral.
Deferral?
And then it'll be up to the deputy mayor to go back
Okay. Yeah.
to her work and arm wrestling and all that stuff. She does very good. Just defer, I think. Stay in your lane. Maybe the solicitor.
Maybe someone can.
Sure, ask the solicitor if it's appropriate.
Sorry, I'm not on the committee.
No, they're talking up there. I'd like to hear from someone up on the high bench.
I'm going to ask the solicitor to weigh in, please.
Thank you. So a motion to defer does not need to have a time limit associated with it, but it usually is preferable to have one. It is, if it's not brought back within 6 months, it's automatically withdrawn. But also hearing from Brad, and you may wish to chime in yourself, it would usually be best if there was some direction to staff as to what you would like them to bring back with at that, once it is brought back to the committee.
Thank you. I would be happy to defer with some direction regarding the right turning lane, the concerns raised by Councillor of that particular district, Councillor Lovelace. And there were a lot of things that have been discussed today. I'm sure staff are paying attention to what those kinds of things are. I remember the wall and the dip and all the things that are at play. So, yeah, let's leave it there. I'll defer that. I'll move that deferral. Unless someone else can add to it, I'd be happy to, a friendly amendment.
Thank you, Councillor Kent. And moving to Councillor Oathead, please.
Second that, just to keep it on the go here. But there's two questions that I have. The first is, I don't think we want to defer the prioritization of the operational improvements. So we need to think about this a little, Mr. Anguish or Mr. Solicitor. And the second thing is, I think there should be some sort of a timeline put around this. So maybe that's what Brad's aiming towards. So I think maybe we need to have a couple of minutes break here just while we look at a timeline and how to keep the operational priorities moving forward. So. It's on the floor and I support it, but I think we're going to have to amend it here. Maybe Brad can guide us.
Yeah, yes, thank you, Madam Chair. Again, at the behest of the committee, basically, we're going to move ahead unless somebody says otherwise. We'll move ahead with recommendation number 1, regardless of the deferral. That is the plan. Okay, and if I don't hear opposition on that, we'll go with that. I understand that the deferral goes something like this. Return with options for a right turn lane ahead of future development. Options for a right turn lane ahead of future development. I believe that is the gist of what you're saying. I think look, staff is working through budget right now, so I would ask some latitude. We're probably looking at 3 to 4 months to sit down with planning and kind of go through this, because it would be a bit of it would be an option analysis, and it does involve real estate, it involves some costing in order to come back with a report. So we'll absolutely do that, and unless Colin has any concerns, that's the game plan.
Well, then I'd be happy to offer what might be a friendly amendment to the deferral, that this be deferred and that staff be asked to return with options for a right turn lane ahead of future development, just as you said, Brad.
Thank you, Councillor Oathead.
We're just finishing up the wording on the amendment, and the amendment will include the wording for a right turning lane.
Okay. Yeah.
Thank you.
If it's friendly, you don't need to vote on it, so. Yeah.
So the wording for the amendment is on the clerk's screen there, if you should be able to see it.
I was going to support was return, the staff would return with options for a right turning lane ahead of future development.
Councillor Kent? Yeah.
Staff will return with those options.
Yes. Go ahead, Councillor Kent.
Thank you. I'm just trying to help make sure we get to a future intersection improvements to a future meeting with direction to staff to return with a supplementary report with options, providing options for a right turning lane prior to future development. There's nothing in this right now that's sort of identifying that we're looking for staff to return with something.
It's implied it's right turning outbound, but just to be clear, it's right turning outbound. Yeah, thank you.
Moved by Councillor Kent, second by Councillor Oathead. All in favor? Those opposed? That motion carries. Next, we have 12.1.4, 2022-23 QI, Halifax Transit KPI Report. I understand that there's a presentation for this item. Mr. Regi, Ms. Hughes, and Mr., I'm sorry if I pronounced this wrong, Jaggi? Mark, oh, it's a long list of people. The whole team is here. Thank you.
Thank you. Patricia Hughes, Director of Planning and Customer Engagement at Halifax Transit. So I'm here with the Q1 updates. And just a reminder, Q1 reflects April, May, and June of this year, so that's what the data is focused on, although the project updates are a bit more recent. So the project updates fall under 4 main categories that are the transportation priority outcomes for Halifax Transit. This is the Q1, so the first one out of this business plan. So my previous presentations had 3 categories, and we're to split things up a little bit differently now, so there's 4 categories that I'll go through. The first one is safe and accessible mobility network. So there are 5 business plan deliverables under that one. 3 are still in progress, 2 are complete. On the following slides, I'll give a few quick updates about some of these projects. I'd just like to note the 4th one there, passenger conduct campaign, I didn't include a slide for, but just wanted to highlight that's the transit code. And yesterday we received a National Marketing and Communications Award for the project at the CUDA Award ceremony in Montreal. So I wanted to highlight that today. The paratransit project, so on the chart that's called Installation of Mobile Data Terminals on Accessibus Vehicles. So that was that installation that we have been talking about for a bit now. So that is complete. The mobile data terminals were all installed, completed by the end of September, up and running, just working out the very last of any technical issues or process changes, but they are all on the buses now, providing accurate data, and looking forward to looking at some of that data in the coming months and working to improve efficiencies. The second one I wanted to highlight was the accessible taxi service. So this new accessible service called Extra Care Taxi has been introduced. The first trips were available in July with 1 or 2 vehicles, but we're now up to 9 accessible vans. And a celebratory launch event was held at City Hall on October 11th. So thank you for everyone who participated and came out to that. So the service is up and running, and a lot of great testimonials and positive feedback on it to date. The second category is connected and healthy long-range mobility planning. So 3 business unit deliverables under this one, 1 of which has been postponed and 2 are in progress. So just a few highlights, no surprise to the committee members, but the Mill Cove Ferry service was at Regional Council in September, marking we're a milestone as we near completion of the phase 1 of the project, which is planning and design. Regional Council approved moving forward with a reduced case scenario for funding, so that project will continue to advance. Also, the West Bedford Park and Ride has been open for some time now, but we did hold the grand opening on October 12th. It was great weather for the grand opening, and we had the CPL and school band there. So thank you to everyone who participated in that as well. And since then, just last week, there was new signage installed on the slide, the West Bedford Park and Ride signage. So probably the last time that this project will be in my updates, because it's pretty much complete now, just waiting for the heated shelters, which are coming anytime, so.
You can mention that.
I'll come back with pictures of the heated shelters, I guess. Another project that's almost complete, the Woodside Ferry Terminal renovation, which was a major significant renovation. The work has been going on for 2 years. A few things that have just happened in the last 2 weeks. We have the exterior signage now, which includes the lit sign on the outside of the building and the ferry icon. So the last step there is really around the escalators, which are essentially ready. We're just waiting for the inspection so we can turn those on and get up and running. So the grand reopening is scheduled for November 16th. I have a lot of great plans and welcome anyone to attend. And since we were talking about signage, I just thought I'd add this one as well. The Halifax Ferry Terminal signage had a bit of a facelift this year. This was a bit of a late deliverable from a project a few years ago when we did some renovations, but looking very sharp these days. And I did mention there was one deliverable that was postponed, and as everyone is aware, that's the Moving Forward Together plan changes that were slated to occur next month. Those are postponed. The only change that will be happening with the November service changes is the implementation of the Route 50, which is a short route from the bridge terminal to the dockyards. So there'll be a slight service increase and change to the routing. When the rest of the scheduled changes that are postponed, when the rest of those are implemented, we do plan on slightly adjusting the Route 4 and the Route 10 in the south end of Halifax. So I believe we updated that last time as well, but just a reminder. And for November, we did also make slight adjustments to the Route 433 to help with schedule adherence. And there's been several minor route changes taking place as a result of the Cogswell project. So it's a bit of a summary of the transit routing changes that have been or will be happening. The third category, electrification of transportation. So the Raggett Lake Transit Center design started back in the spring. The schematic design phase is essentially complete now, and the detailed design is being worked on. The battery electric buses, the first 60, have been ordered, and those are through Nova Bus. And another exciting announcement was in September when we received approval, ISIP funding, so Investing in Canada Infrastructure Program funding for phase 1 of the Burnside Transit Center Eco Rebuild project. So that funding was for planning and design of that facility. The final category, innovative performance excellence, 2 projects under this, both in progress. Really just one to highlight, the first one there, Fare Management Project. So the milestone we expect to hit shortly is the mobile app. Again, no surprise to the committee members, but that constitute phase 1 of this program, set to launch in the coming months. And there is currently a staff report working its way through council related to changes to the user charges bylaw to allow potential new fare products on that app, for example, a day pass. So that's in flight as well right now. Some highlights with the performance measures. Overall boardings were up 71% this quarter compared to last year. Revenue increased, but both those numbers are still below the 1920 numbers. Average daily boardings were 71,689 people on weekdays, just over 48,000 on Saturdays, and 35,000 on Sundays. System-wide on-time performance was 82%. That was lower than the same time last year. Accessibus operated significantly more trips compared to the year before, 80% more trips, in fact, and 90% of customer feedback was resolved within standards. The mean distance between failures was decreased, which is the wrong direction. So looking at what we can do there, the mean distance between service calls increased, which is the direction we do want to go into, and there was an increase for Accessibus as well. The maximum daily number of buses that could not complete their scheduled service was 15, and the daily average was 5.4, and maintenance costs were 2 cents lower than the budgeted cost. And that concludes my presentation. Thank you.
Thank you. And questions? I have Councillor Mancini up first, please.
Thank you, Madam Chair. Patricia, thanks very much. Appreciate it. I have a handful of questions here. I think no secret to you and Dave, my favorite is Accessibus. I'm wondering, can we compile the efforts and the changes that have taken place in the last 2 to 3 years? I'm not asking you to give me that list now, but I think, as I mentioned in an earlier agenda item, we are terrible at telling the world of what we've done good and accomplished. And I think Councillor Kent alluded to a previous presentation about listening to the residents. Well, when it comes to Accessibus, we listen to our riders, we listen to our customers, and there's been a huge, and your last slide show that our usage has gone up, and I've spoken to those people that use it, those same people that 2 or 3 years ago were crying literally crying when they were telling me how poor the Accessibus was, and we've come a long way, and I think we really need to wave that flag and say this is what we've accomplished, this is what's been done. So, and be it a campaign to celebrate, but we need it, and I mean, there's still more work to be done, right? Absolutely, but we've gotten better. So Dave, your comments on that?
Sorry, really quick, do you mind putting the motion on the floor, please?
Was there a motion?
Yep.
No. Sure. Right. Yeah, I don't, on the agenda I have is the older one. Does somebody else have that one? You wouldn't mind, Tim, please?
Councillor Oudhay, would you mind putting the motion on the floor, please? Thank you.
Sure, I'll just move that the Transportation Standing Committee to accept the staff report dated October the 12th, 2022. So moved.
Thank you.
Katie.
Is there anyone else that'd like to speak? I'd like to speak to that. Thank you.
Great. Thank you. Good afternoon. Dave Riggi, Executive Director, Halifax Transit, through the chair. First off, thank you for the kind words. I think it's been, it's been a lot of effort to improve Accessibus, but as you note, there's still a lot more work to be done. So what we will be doing, I don't have a date today to share, but we will be coming to TSC with a bit of an update overall on kind of what's happened and recommendations. Now that we're several years of experience past the initial approval of the Accessibus Continuous Improvement Plan, we'll be coming back to committee with a bit of a state of the union, I guess, in terms of where it is and recommendations on how we carry that forward. But your point is well taken that we often don't pat ourselves on the back, or maybe share the good news is a better way to put that. So we'll take that away and see what other thoughts we have to kind of really get the word out about what's going on with Accessibus.
Good. Glad to hear that. Woodside Ferry, waiting on the inspection, but we've been waiting now for a few weeks. What's the holdup? Do we have do we know, is this physically the inspector comes by and looks at it and then goes away? I mean, why is it taking as long as it is?
Yes, and I'm not well-versed on the process, but my understanding is we have to apply for a license similar to an elevator, and then we wait for an appointment for an inspector to come. So the work has been complete for a while, but we did already have one inspection and had to make some adjustments following that. So we should have a date for the inspection any day now.
Okay, thanks. So we got a minute left here. The route changes that were supposed to be happening this month, you mentioned that they're being deferred or delayed. Do we have a time frame where I know it's based on the operators and resources. Do we have a time frame when we may see those changes? Are we looking at a few months? Are we looking at 6 months, a year?
Through the chair, not fully defined yet, but it will certainly be into next year. I mean, at this point, February schedule change won't be an option. I think we're going to be well into next year, but we'll have more information coming forward to council on that once we have a little more solid on that.
And tied into that, our ferry is still every 30 minutes. Is that correct? Has that been changed back to 15?
Just during the after I think it's 2 o'clock on the Alderney run, we're still running the 30-minute service after that. Speaking with staff, so we have had a large wave of successful recruiting in that area, and we have and are continuing to onboard new ferry crew members, and are hopeful that probably later into November we'll be in a position to put that back to full service.
But that's a different skill set, though, too, Dave, versus operators of the bus, right? These guys have to have tickets and all that kind of stuff, right?
Yeah, the ferry crew members are a very, very specialized skill set and a very in-demand skill set. And even before, the entire world ran into the types of recruitment challenges we're seeing across all business lines, ferry workers were always hard to recruit. It's a very specialized skill set that's very hard to find. So if you have children that you want to have long-term employment for their whole lives, put them into the marine sector, because there is way more jobs than people.
Very quickly, just for the last question, Madam Chair, Patricia, you mentioned about the mobile app coming in months. Again, I know we keep asking when, but we're eager to see that, and our riderships, our riders are eager to see that. Didn't want you to sit through the whole meeting without stepping up to the plate, man, so.
Much appreciated. Mark Santilli, Manager of Technical Services for Halifax Transit, through the chair. It's definitely not months away. The negotiations have nearly concluded with the vendor for the mobile app. We expect to have it ready to be signed probably next week, and then we'll be dependent on the vendor for what their timelines are. In the early sales pitches, they indicated 4 to 6 weeks is their maximum rollout time. I don't know that we can achieve that. I'm being a little more cautious in terms of what I expect, maybe 6 to 8 weeks, but it'll definitely be as quick as we can do it.
Okay, thank you. Thank you, Madam Chair.
Thank you, Councillor Mancini. If there are any more questions from council, I'd like you to indulge me as chair. I have a question. On October 18th, the express bus was canceled. I'm sure you've heard of this. There was a lot of negative feedback that Councillor Morris and myself received. One resident said that she was not notified about the bus cancellation until she was actually standing at the stop, so she was quite frustrated to find out that information so late. She was trying to get to work for 7 o'clock, and she referred to the number 135 plus other buses, so just wondering what happened that day, and do you anticipate that happening again? Thank you.
Certainly, I can address that question. And, first off, I certainly apologize to any of our customers that are experiencing this. I mean, it is the most challenging time I've ever seen from a staffing perspective. And again, that's a trend we're seeing, transit systems all across the country, all across North America. So we're certainly not alone in that, but are working hard to, to increase the ranks of our operators so that we can bring back the full service. With regard to that specific item, so there actually is a briefing note making its way through the process now to council as a whole to speak around the service disruptions, what happens, especially those sorts of early morning ones, which are particularly challenging. So, but I guess what I can say, in summary of that today is, as committee will likely be aware, we had previously curtailed service that is on what we call extras. So those are short pieces of work that are unassigned on a regular basis and are kind of assigned to drivers on a day-to-day basis. So we've curtailed those. Those are really our greatest source of flexibility as we carry on operations. The challenge is that we are seeing from time to time days where the staffing shortages go beyond that. So we end up losing work, losing putting work out with really little to no notice is what ends up happening. So, if that happens for an afternoon shift, typically we'll know early enough that we can put something out on social media or whatever other means we have to let people know. The problem is if it's a trip that needs to be somewhere at 6 o'clock in the morning and let's say the operator calls in at 5:30, unfortunately what's going to happen is by the time we can get the word out, there's going to be people at the bus stop. So we are doing everything we can to avoid that situation, and there'll be some further information in the briefing note making its way to council, but that's typically what's happening in those circumstances.
Thank you. That will be a relief to many residents. Thanks again. Question has been called. Those in favor? Opposed? That motion carries. Thank you. Are there any motions? We don't have any in camera. Madam Clerk, are there any added items? No added items. Any notices of motion, Madam Clerk? No. Okay, and there's no public participation. Oh. Oh.
There were no registered speakers for public participation.
Thank you, Madam Clerk. From what I understand, the date of our next meeting is November 24th, 22, and I'm called for an adjournment, please. Thank you, Councillor Mancini. We're adjourned.